Hello everyone, and we're thrilled you're able to join us for this live stream of the Future of Insurance Europe. Coming up next, we've got a live panel discussion for which I'll hand you over to the moderator, Peter Manchester at EY.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you very much. And good afternoon to everyone. As Emma said, my name is Peter Manchester. I lead EY's insurance business in EMEIA, and I'm also EY's global insurance consulting leader. I've spent about 30 years working across P&C and life segments, undertaking very large-scale systems and process transformation, and I'm really delighted to moderate this panel today with to Mario, David, and Lou, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a few seconds, and perhaps give a brief perspective on the subject today, which is around technology driving competitive advantage in the insurance sector. But just from my perspective, I think this is a really critical question given where we're currently at. I mean, my personal view is that the sector is at a point of inflection, whether that's demographic shifts, whether it's climate change, whether it's disruptive technology, which we'll talk about. I think it's really fundamentally reshaping the business environment and requiring insurers to adopt perhaps different responses if they are to thrive, survive, and remain relevant. I think we'd all agree that COVID-19 in some ways has both amplified and accelerated these trends, and perhaps the future is arriving sooner than we all expected. We'll let our panelists talk about that as we get to them. I think that in this environment, from a technology perspective, in the conversations I have with clients, I hear a number of consistent themes. One is around the shift of investment to dealing with the new normal that we live with today. A real urgency around digital first, driven primarily by a change in customer behaviors, attitudes. And allied to this, a real growing importance of customer experience, whether it's across face-to-face, whether it's digital, or whether it's in some form of hybrid structure. And I guess finally, a questioning about the ability to utilize some of the new technologies out there and data ecosystems to really power a lot of the activity around AI and machine learning that perhaps have been more muted currently than we all thought 2 or 3 years ago. So I think disruption of new technologies is given. How insurers respond to it, how, when, and in what way they respond to it, I think is going to be the important factor. But I will let my fellow panelists introduce themselves and perhaps give their perspective, and then we'll start on some questions. So maybe handing over to Mario in the first instance.
So good afternoon, everyone. And my name is Mario Ricco. I'm responsible for group claims at Generali Group. And in my role, I am setting the standards of claims management to our business units in the group. I'm supporting their local implementations, but I'm also steering them towards technical excellence in claims and also monitoring their performance. So I've been in this role since 2013, and it's quite a while that we are talking about technology and how that is impacting our business. And I must say, over the last years, that became more intense and tangible. So I'm very happy to be here today to take part in this conversation. As technology is enabling us to do great things in claims.
Thank you, Mario. Lou, perhaps moving over to you.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Peter. My name's Louise Smith, or Lou. Most people call me Lou. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for Lloyd of London, which is a real privilege, actually, to do this role. You will have seen we've also recently launched our Blueprint 2, in fact, on the 5th of November, where we talk about data and technology really driving and powering what we're looking to do across our 2 big end-to-end journeys that we're focused on around open market and delegated. So I think right now, and I think, Peter, you touched on it, data is critical. And also, I think and this might be slightly controversial, but I also think it's all about purpose and behaviour as well as technology. So I think innovation and how we move forward is absolutely within that purpose bucket. Having seen the rise of the retail bank challenges, which is actually where my career was, both in Barclays and then into RBS, and we saw the rise of the retail challenges in the last 10 years, I think this is a really interesting time for insurance and other aspects of financial services, actually. So I'm with you. I think this is actually a real point of inflection as we move forward.
Brilliant. Well, we'll hopefully cover some of those points as we go through. David, finally over to you.
Yeah, so again, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me on the panel. I'd start by saying I hope everyone who's listening in is their families and they're all safe and secure at this time. It's a challenging time for us all in the world at the moment. I mean, I'm the Group CIO at RSA Group. It's one of the oldest insurers in the world. My role here is to really focus on transformation of the business, all lines of business globally. And I have a personal focus on our UK&I business, a personal operational focus on that as well. I look at this competitiveness in Europe and how we take that forward with a different lens, actually. I think my lens is the insurance industry has no choice but to change. Economics, we're seeing a slow growth environment. We're seeing a hardening of markets more so than at any other point in the past. We're seeing a lot of geopolitical tensions across the world now. Look what's happened in the US in recent times. We're seeing more regulation come into play. It's concerning. It's very much concerning of how do you compete and how do you win in this market, in the markets you serve. And we're seeing a different generation coming through in terms of how they want to trade and their expectations of how they interact with a core insurer or a core broker or a subsidiary or an affinity partner that we all interact with. We have to change and disrupt ourselves. I don't think we've been doing that fast enough. I think the technologies and the architectures and the strategies we've been bringing to the table are no longer warranting the right pace of change culturally in any business. I think we need some different thinking. And I think we're seeing an ecosystem of disruptors coming through who are getting there quicker than us. Now, what they haven't figured out yet is how do they galvanize market share. As soon as someone really figures out how they galvanize market share, we'll have real big problems on our hands, right? And they realize the renewal cycle process and they realize the onboarding cycle process and barriers to entry still restricts organizations from coming into these markets. So I think we've got a lot of work to do around how do we modernize ourselves. I think we've got a lot of work to do, and this is the industry, not just my organization, a lot of work to do around that think tank design thinking approach. How do you build those ecosystems, and how do you get to the true levels of agility and competitiveness, which I think our customers are starting to expect from us. And most shareholders, if you're a PLC, that's where they want their investment to really provide a positive outcome in terms of shareholder value.
No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. So let's kick off with some of the points. Maybe start, David, with you, given you just finished. Which technologies do you think are going to have the greatest impact in insurance, perhaps in the more short to medium term? And are we moving quickly enough to assimilate these, make these happen?
Yeah, I don't want to make it about the technology, Peter, actually. I want to make it about the markets that we're trying to serve. What markets are going to be more prominent in terms of what our customers expect, and what products and services can we develop, which will then be underpinned with technologies? And great examples of that, if you look at our P&C, right? We need to start driving more value with things with IoT, as an example. Sensory technologies working with base products like motor insurance and home insurance and pet insurance will help drive a better value proposition for customers. People want to switch on and switch off insurance. They no longer want to hear from us that it's going to cost £300 and they're not 100% sure how we even got to that rating and that pricing and that value, because we don't always explain ourselves particularly well. And the terms and conditions can be 40 pages long, as an example, and the small prints doesn't really provide the right level of explanation for a customer. We need to move to a more consumption-based view. We need technologies that can support that. We need our customers to feel they're getting that value. They need to feel, if I pay this money, I won't get to a claim. and I will see a residual change in the value of my premium year on year on year, and I really understand why. And if I'm out of the country for 6 months, I don't have to pay, right? So when I think about the technologies, I don't think in terms of its analytics, it's working with our data scientists and looking at gradient booster machines. It's the COTS packages from the usual organizations that provide those COTS packages, and we've got to modernize onto that. I totally think in terms of what do our customers want? How are we explaining our products and services to them? How are we differentiating those products and services so they get more for their money and more value for their money? And how do we create an expedient ecosystem and environment where it feels more like a retail banking online type environment and less like a, we only talk to our insurer once a year, and actually I've forgotten how to log into my portal, but I've got this number I can phone on a contact center. I can wait several minutes on a call if I do get through to the agent. And if I do get through to the agent, they're probably going to ask me all the same questions again, right? So you know, we need to sort of figure out that technology disruption, look at our competitors who do it better, bring all of that thinking in. And Lou, I know you're doing a lot of that with Lloyd's, right? I keep my ears to the wall, right? But we need to really start picking the pace up in that, because I think that's really going to be the advantage you allude to, Peter. But I would never say to any organization, pick technologies. If you fall into that trap, you've just wasted investment for the company. Think about your customer, think about your market and your proposition. The technologies will come very quickly.
I agree. Lou, I saw you nodding there. I mean, it'd be good to get your perspective on that.
I've never met David, and I think he's brilliant already. So let me just say that we're probably going to agree on a lot of stuff. But without repeating, because I don't want to do that, but let me try and do a bit of builds, because I think technology is an enabler to 4 or 5 things, actually. So I agree with David. You have to organise around the customer. Now, everybody says that. The thing that the brands and the business models we all love, you feel that. And that's the difference. Is it's not about going, hi, I'm really organised and I'm customer centric. Actually, you've got to feel that front to back, how you're structured, how you fund, how you invest, how you deliver change, how do you actually test, iterate and continue to move. And I think that's one thing that we've really tried to do with the blueprint, is pivot away from solutions and specific platforms or technologies, but go, actually, how do we really drive a brilliant experience around open market, whether I'm getting cover or whether I'm recovering from loss? And it makes you think in a different way. Now, we've still got a long way to go. I'm not at all saying we're there, but I think you have to feel that through the organization. The thing I love about startups, they talk about their brands in 30 seconds with such passion that if you could get that into an organization in somebody's own narrative, you change a culture overnight. So we've got lots to learn in that space. The other one is around collaboration and connectedness. That also helps us to move and move quickly. So what can we do to not just connect as an organization, but connect further out with our customers and learn? Learn in the open, research in the open, and design in the open. That will then tell us what things should we actually be experimenting with. And we've done a few. I mean, when we pivoted all to remote, I mean, we actually worked really well. It's the one question everybody asks me, what happened? Actually, it worked really well. And we were even testing startup solutions that in some way mimicked or tried to create that water cooler foundation conversation that you get in the underwriting room. And actually, some of it worked. The gamification worked. Brokers love gamification. I probably should have thought about that. But in terms of how do you get collaboration and connectedness with your customers, not just once, not just on annual cycles or monthly cycles or specific events, but ongoing feedback in that learning. And then the other one for me, and I think David covered it, and I think we're uniquely placed actually to deal with some of the biggest challenges around and a real purpose. So pandemics are obviously in one, and it's a horrific intervention. Cybercrime, climate change, all of those things. And I think as an industry, we're uniquely placed with purpose to actually do something that's good. And for me, it's how do we create flexible business models that can adapt quickly? I mean, I've been so interested in some of the more legacy brands or the established brands, how they've pivoted their whole model to work in a different way, and it feels different, as well as the startups who've actually looked at how do we create a sense of community in their brand as we've moved into remote. Those are the ones for me, and we've got to learn from them about not just about adapting now, but how do we build that flexibility as we move forward so that we can respond to this stuff. Because it's not about going back, it's about how do we create something new.
No, I agree, and I'd like to come back on a couple of those points in a second, but just picking up on Mario, so claims obviously is one of perhaps the moments of truth in insurance. So from a technology perspective, what's your perspective around some of the assets you see being developed from a claims perspective in enabling our insurers' commitments to be met?
Yeah, touching technology, we are living a period where it's quite challenging to talk about which is the one that is most interesting or most effective. We see every day new companies, new innovative providers bringing a great solution. So maybe I would prefer to talk about which are the things we're looking for into technology for claims. Well, first I will start saying that everything is about improving the value proposition of claims to connect to what was said until now. So we have to make sure, and we stress a lot in Generali that claims is not a back office activity. Claims is part of the value proposition of insurance. So in our countries, it's not only the value proposition to our customers but also to our distributors, where in some of our markets the personal relationship with agents and tied agents are very, very strong. So also they must be part of this conversation. When looking at technology, we are, and I see also personally that there are some common areas we're looking for. First, it's about bringing flexibility. So one of the issues we have in the past is to have rigidity to change processes and to change the claims journey. So it's important to find technologies which allow us to adapt and change and bring also new features into the process. So flexibility is one point. Second, facilitate also the virtual interaction with customers and partners. And the pandemic crisis accelerated that, but that was already a topic on the table, and now became what we're calling now the new normal. So the new normal will be to interact remotely and have virtual workflows. And you need technology for that. And then there is the need for simplification, and you have all the possibilities around automation, but also more and more I saw recently also things like process mining, also to understand where we have to adapt and change our processes. So there is a lot also that can be done on simplification still. And finally, around sophistication, which is everything that we can do to take better decisions. We still rely a lot on personal expertise, and that will remain. But I strongly believe that our experts can also be very much supported by external information, data analysis, and everything that allows them to take better decisions.
Thank you, David. And just taking that and coming back to Lou, just on the, I guess the point you made around sort of pivoting to new technology, to use of insurtechs, etc. Is there a right way to transform? I guess we hear a lot of debates around the burden of legacy versus, setting up as a greenfield site. It's a lot easier. We can just sort of seal and cement the old legacy bit and carry on. Or do you do more of a brownfield regeneration and take the existing legacy? What's your perspective on that whole sort of greenfield versus legacy?
I've seen both. And it's so firstly, it's a leadership challenge, whichever one you go for. Obviously, within the retail banks, I work for two pretty big incumbents, one Barclays and one RBS, well, NatWest now, which was pretty huge from a legacy point of view. And you saw some of that in some of the changes that we tried to do with Williams and Glyn, when we tried to actually push that out of the organisation. Secondly, I've seen a number of players build a challenger off the side and then try and bring it back into the organisation. I think that's really tough. For me, and it depends what the situation is, but the model that I've seen a few times that works, but only if it's grounded with the right leadership and behaviour, is around how do you create that strong connection, strong sort of integrated on the side, for want of a better phrase. So this might sound like a bit of a fudgy answer, but it's not. So go with me for a second. But just touching the side of the organisation so that you don't create that peering in and it doesn't float off on its own into something that you can never pull back or understand actually what the purpose or the value drivers were behind it. And I've seen a couple of examples where this has worked. And actually what starts to happen is the old components that you need to then start to migrate to new becomes the thing that's left. I'm seeing a couple of those instances in retail banking. I think Standard Chartered and Mox is a really interesting model. I think Dennis Govan and the team are doing a great. I think that's actually quite an interesting model that what Dennis and the team are driving through. I'm certainly looking at how do you create speed, but the flexibility, but without creating something so separate it loses what it's trying to do because you're just focused on keeping it separate. I think with legacy, it's an and then David will have a view on this. It's interesting because we also talk ourselves into issues with legacy. There are things that you can do to actually continue to move. And that doesn't always involve massive technology heavy lifting.
Yeah,
that's why it comes back to purpose and what you're trying to drive for, and then organize around that on the outcome rather than start with, well, we're stuck because we've got a ton of legacy, because then you're just talking yourself an issue. But I've seen a few models, just to summarize that, integrated just on the edge.
David?
Yeah, I think well said, Lou. And like you, I also worked at NatWest Group for a little while. I actually worked on the Williams and Glyn program, so a bit scared there of your comments, but that's fine. The scars are still with me, right? I don't think of it as legacy, Peter. I call, I give everyone a hard time in our business when they keep on giving me, views on legacy. I call it our heritage and our vintage environment. It's where we make our money. It's what grows our revenue today, right?
Yeah.
We give ourselves a tough time about it, but we serve our customers through these systems today, and we have been for many, many decades. So let's not give ourselves too much of a tough time about that. I think I go back to Lou's point. What are we trying to achieve, and what are we trying to solve, and what's the best way of getting there? And whenever we talk about some kind of migration activity, the individuals in every organization that can create that cultural tension are the commercial leaders, because they're of the opinion we're going to lose business, we're going to lose revenue, we're not going to do the renewal, the back book won't migrate appropriately, etc., etc. And that then leads to long lead times, that then leads to major challenges around the technology changes you want to do, that then leads to the operating pressures of your cost base, etc., etc. So I try not to fall into that trap. I try to remind the business, we're making this change because it's a new change for our organization. These are all the things, if you look at NPS surveys, these are all the things our customers say about us with our existing systems. And we know the cost of change of those existing systems will just take too long and cost too much. The new environment allows us to serve those customers better with the value proposition which they're after. That's not a risk for me. That's just about doing the job and doing it really well, right? And there's different permutations of that, as Lou said, you can go with. At the heart of it, for me, it's about building that roadmap, being very clear with what your target state looks like, being very clear with what your vintage environment looks like and how you want to migrate of it, and then figuring out a plan with the business that has the right risk appetite to migrate into that environment. And that can be different for a claim strategy compared to a policy replatforming, compared to what you're doing with risk management and underwriting and pricing. All of these things can happen in a very different way, but it's really important you build it end to end. So you take a product and you build out that value solution end to end, because the minute you start to be piecemeal about it, you end up in a patchwork environment. A little bit sits over here. You still got teams running in your heritage and vintage environment. You don't migrate over for that particular product, but you've got one product that sits in a new co-environment but doesn't have enough gross written premium associated to it to justify the spend. You can end up in a really challenging place if you don't build out the roadmap appropriately, product by product, end-to-end value chain, and figure out with the commercial teams how you migrate off it. But it's, I try to stop people challenging me on the legacy environment, because you know what? Until you give me an option to invest and migrate off it, that's the environment you should kiss and hug every day, because that's what's allowing us to serve our customers on a daily basis.
You need to stroke it, don't you, David?
Absolutely. Not a carrot and a stick. Absolutely.
Oh, stroke legacy, that's the new buzzword for today. If I look though on the other side of that equation, that obviously there's a huge amount of talk around digitally native. Insurers need to become that for different segments of their customer groups. The new normal drives much more of a digital native focus. Now, but from an insurance perspective, are we just adding new technologies onto an existing model, or are we trying to reinvent? Maybe David, you want to pick up on that first?
I don't think we're adding. I think that technology has moved on, right? We talk about insurance in a box. We talk about low-code platforms. We talk about modernizing our infrastructure, coming out of data centers, not being on premise. We talk about highly business configurable platforms and less coding. And effectively, all you need is the integration, the APIs to effectively interlock with other systems and chat to them. And you remove that agility where you have to go and talk to an IT team and wait several months before the change actually gets made. But actually, the SMEs can configure through metadata these platforms on their own and have good SMEs that understand end-to-end their business models. And IT sits in the background moving forward, and it's just looking after the infrastructure environment or the modernist environment, but not necessarily being so pervasive with doing the change, right? Because SMEs, if you build the architectures right, can sort of make some of those changes themselves. I think we are moving towards that, but insurance is still stubborn, right? Insurance is stubborn, right? The broker environment's stubborn. It's a paper-based environment. There's still a lot of modernized thinking. And like what Lou said earlier, there's a lot of modernistic thinking that still needs to happen in terms of behavior and trading behavior predominantly, and having individuals that want to work with digital dashboards, want to have big binders going into the London market anymore, right? There's still a lot of straight through processing with checks, and not everyone having to go piecemeal with off-system control checks and pulling out spreadsheets and doing extracts and not trusting the models, so we're going to do it on an Excel spreadsheet. Until you get to that behavior and that trust from business leaders, from their staff, from actually believing you can digitize and systemize these things, you'll never really change the model. It's a stubborn environment compared to other sectors, and we need to figure out how we change that. But there's also a different view, which is not everything's bad. And actually, how much digitization do you need compared to the human touch, right? And people still want to talk to people. Ultimately, for different products and services, people want to talk to people. If I'm in a claim situation and I look at Mario, I want to talk to someone, Mario, right? I'm just being totally honest. If I crash my car, I want to talk to someone. I don't want an automated response come to me. I want to pick up the phone. I want to know it's going to be taken care of. I want to know when that claims assessor is going to have a look at it, tell me what it's worth. When am I going to get a check, or when is it going to get fixed in terms of the underlying asset? So I think we need to be careful here with, we need to digitize everything in insurance. It's a decade behind everyone else. I don't think that's the case, but I also want us to grab and gravitate towards better ways of working, being more agile, and using the technology to serve that purpose, not the other way.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. I was going to ask Mario, so, if I look at Ping An, 95% of its claims are straight through processed from the moment, say, the car accident happens to the check. So I get very much David's question, is that the right thing? Is that the right target we should be aiming for? Or is it more of a mix between face-to-face, engagement around that customer experience and automation and digitization?
That's a good question, and also a good point to touch, because one mistake that I see often is to not even look at how we are managing claims and just bring inside a technology. And this is it's the short-term view to get some effect to show, but at the end you don't have a major impact. So the initiatives I saw with higher impacts on claims are those where we carefully think about the claims process end to end. And as David was saying, maybe there are things that I don't need to touch. I just need to keep it. Other areas I must add some technological component. And in this exercise of the rethinking, another aspect that we sometimes are missing is maybe to start doing things that before we're not doing. So the fact that, and I agree with David, I believe still people needs to have personal relationship. There are claims where you just need to be reimbursed. So if I think about a health invoice, medical expense reimbursement, this is something that you need to do it quickly, so you don't need to interact too much. But you have once in your life one bad experience. I think it's important, the personal contact, and that's where maybe where technology can also help us. Maybe in the areas where we were not talking or speaking too much, we can add this personal touch, and this is the kind of reflection that we have to make in rethinking the claims journey. Not only about the technology, but about how we are organized, what we are doing, what our people are doing, and what our providers and partners are doing, and if we can evolve that.
No, I'd agree with that, absolutely. So just pivoting away from, well, I guess aligned to digital, but from my perspective, innovation is key to really achieving competitive advantage. But I'd say in insurance, perhaps innovation struggles to scale beyond, initial pilots or proofs of concept. What's sort of stopping us really driving through innovation into the heart of the business? Maybe Lou, you want to give some thoughts on that, given Blueprint 2 and all the change that has to happen in the marketplace.
Sure. I mean, we could talk about this forever, I think, because actually it's a pretty broad topic. I think it's a bit like when we used to say we had customer organizations and they were the only ones worrying about the customer. We need to be careful we don't do there's the innovation team, they're the only ones worrying about innovating. Actually, some of the best innovators I've seen are the ones that actually paper over the cracks to make sure customers get a good experience every single day, and you usually find them in operations. So I've seen some of the best innovators because they're innovating every day around actually how do they get whatever that customer outcome is done quickly and transparently. So for me, one of the things I want to avoid is just creating it for the few and those peering in windows where that's not you, because I think that's the wrong mindset. So for me, it's about how do we help people with that entrepreneurial thinking, with that mindset of how do I collaborate, what ecosystems can I connect into, because there are numbers now. I mean, we're seeing them. We've got labs here, as you will know, and there's a number of things coming out of there. Some of them actually, very much to help with today's issues with the COVID-19 issue. Yeah. But actually, it's a way of working and a leadership challenge about how do we help people not only connect into them, but they have researched and understood the pain points. Because an innovative solution might be surfacing a stop decision. How do we change a process? How do we just stop doing something that enables us to move quickly, as well as creating the sandbox environments where we can bring in the new startups, the tech players, the existing tech players to go, well, actually, what would that look like in our environment? How would it work against these customer outcomes? So I think it's a number of things. We're certainly working on that. Again, the blueprint talks about it, both in terms of the skills and talent we're bringing in, but more importantly, the culture and the environment that we want to create and give people the opportunity to openly learn and test and then design with those customer outcomes. I mean, you will have seen we launched, and it was really basic. Again, it wasn't perfect. It was a start point.
Yeah.
It was about saying, okay, we're here, we're going to research, we're going to learn in the open, we're going to design in the open, and sometimes things will go wrong, but that's okay, and then we'll move forward. I've worked in them and I've worked with them, and they served a purpose at their points in time with the innovation type theatres. But actually, all it kind of tended to do was go, well, I actually need to see the next shiny disco ball. But what do you then try and do with it? And we're all running around then to try and find the use case. We've all been there. And I'm not saying that doesn't have a place, because we also need to test and push the boundaries of our thinking. But it has to be against a purpose. And that's the bit that I'm certainly focusing on in my role here as we start to move forward.
No, I agree. David, do you have a view around how you scale this?
Yeah, I mean,
challenge.
Lou makes a really good point. What I would say, just to complement Lou's view, is change or innovation is painful for any company. And companies that are looking for a cost-benefit analysis, they're looking to understand the payback on that investment on day one. They're expecting everything to be eloquent and work first time. They're expecting digital leaders or sponsors to come and explain every aspect of that program and how it's going to work when it touches the customer. Don't understand innovation, right? And if you look at companies like Apple, you look at organizations like Microsoft, who in the past 20 years have made fundamental changes to their operating model, moved away from their old tech, decided to invest and sponsor some of the new technology advancements, not just for their sector, but for agnostic of sector, right? Because we all use these technologies either at home or in our working environment in some way, shape, or form. That came with a significant level of investment and a significant level of failure. And I think it hurts an executive to talk about failure. It's almost taboo. We can't fail. We can't get it wrong. And actually, if you're not allowed to fail, you'll never get it right. You'll never get it right. And if you're not prepared to take risks as an organization, which is the starting point of being competitive, you'll never win in the markets you need to serve. You'll always be 3, 4, 5, never 1, 2, 3. So, you know, I look at innovation and I look at growth as we have to change as an organization. We have to change our culture, our mindsets from the top. You have to let, you know, individuals like Lou and her teams and my teams and Mario's teams, you've got to give us some freedom to explore and to think about the future. You have to accept we're not going to get everything right. You know, maybe don't call it a program, call it a discovery exercise. I don't know if that helps, right? Use different language, right? But we, you know, innovation is tough. It's tough to really put your arms around it and really, you know, understand all aspects of the organization. And I absolutely do agree with Lou around looking at parts of the organization that have no choice but to be innovative because the systems aren't giving them what they want. And operations is a great part. I've learned so much in our ops environment. Those guys perform heroics, in my opinion, right? They really know how to do stuff off system. I call it swivel chair integration. They're looking at 2 or 3 screens. They know, you know, the 3, 4 digits of a policy number, and they know which system to go to. They're amazing with what they do without being given the right tools to do the job. So innovation isn't just about the major breakthrough in the industry. It's about ways of working, culture, people, and how we want to serve our customers.
Okay, well, look, thank you very much. I think I'm being told we're towards the end of our time. So I'd like to really thank Mario, Lou, and David for what I felt was a very engaging discussion and great insight around sort of challenges the insurers are facing today, and also some of the more practical things and perhaps practical perspectives we can bring to bear to actually help transform our sector. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
And Emma, perhaps back to you.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you all. That was such a fantastic discussion. Really appreciate your time and insights. Coming up next, we've got a couple of presentations. The first on distribution transformation. We're going to hear from Christina Teodorovich at AXA, followed by a presentation on transforming the quoting process from Stephen Levine, the Chief Marketing Officer at Cortical.ai. So stick around for those.